Have you ever felt like you're walking on eggshells trying to manage somebody else's behavior? Maybe you set a rule one day only to find yourself making exception the next. Today, we're talking about one of the most misunderstood and maybe underused tools in behavior management, which is boundaries. And trust me, if you think boundaries are about control, you are missing the point. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're going to be talking about boundaries. Now, I hear more than ever people talking about boundaries, and I think there's an increased recognition of the importance in boundaries in relationships. We teach courses for able training around professional boundaries, for instance, but it's something that I've always been aware of because I think it's one of the things I was raised within a customer service environment, and boundaries are a big important part of that. One of the things in customer service is the boundary that you will only see my professional self, not my personal or private self. So no matter what has happened at home or before I arrived at work, as soon as I step behind that counter, I'm stepping onto stage. You are meeting the best of me rather than the worst of me. If I'm feeling poorly, you'd never know it. And the professional boundary in that circumstance is because what I'm going through in my personal life is kind of none of your business. And that's not because in a derogatory way, in the fact that, it shouldn't matter to you or you wouldn't care, but it's because I'm in there in a professional capacity or I'm in a helping relationship. In that helping relationship, I have the responsibility to ensure that we're maintaining that professional boundary, which is in this circumstance, when I'm behind the counter, I'm here for you, but you're not here for me. Now that then maps across to all different types of environments. So those of you who are working in care, for instance, it is a customer service business. The individuals that you support and look after are in a way your customers. If it wasn't for them, you wouldn't have a job. But not meaning that the customer's always right, which is a false statement anyway, but it's about understanding that professional relationship. So as I get to the door to the care home, whatever my problems are, whatever my stress is, whatever my difficulties, no matter whether I'm ill or tired or got financial troubles or whatever it is, as soon as I walk through that door, it's showtime. Now that can be hard work. And it's always really important that you take those moments to step back, step away, and give yourself a break to allow to just drop the mask for a second, take a deep breath and carry on. But it is also important that we're not making our problems other people's. I think I've spoken before in other podcasts about what we call the Batari's box, that my attitude affects my behavior, which affects your attitude, affects your behavior, which affects my attitude, affects my behavior. And that becomes an ongoing spiral that can either be positive or negative. But as a professional, it's my responsibility to prevent my attitude impacting on my behavior because I'm the one that's going to lead to that situation. Now, for those of you who may be caring for a loved one or caring for a child within your household, whether it be a parent or a foster parent, I understand that it's a little bit different because you've got different relationships with those people. They are your loved ones. But again, it's a case of what are we in that particular moment? What do they need us to be in that particular moment? Now, it's important that we have boundaries around that. And this is where boundaries come into play again from a personal self. So professional boundaries is that maintaining a professional relationship. But when we're looking at personal relationships, it's recognizing what we can and can't cope with and making sure that maybe we're explicitly managing our boundaries. Many of us out there, maybe, or many of you listening, may find that you can fall into the trap of being a people pleaser at times. So even though you've had a really rough week, even though you're really tired, maybe you're emotionally run down, you're not at your best in the slightest, but then a friend invites you to something or asks you to do them a favor. And even though you really don't know whether you can manage it, you don't want to do it, you end up saying yes just to keep them happy. Now, there's pros and cons to that. I suppose that sometimes it is nice to do things for other people, but sometimes you need to recognize, well, is that in their best interest anyway? Maybe I'm not going to be my best at this particular moment in time. They're not going to get the best me. We're not going to have the best time. And I'm then going to potentially, my social battery is run down, and I'm then going to suffer as a result of that for the next 2 days and be less efficient and less helpful or less able to cope. So actually having a boundary in that situation going, do you know what? I'd absolutely love to join you, but I am absolutely shattered. I just don't think I can do it tonight. But that takes a lot of courage. It can be really difficult for some people to be able to kind of have that boundary and put that in place. I know on other podcasts, we've spoken about taps and drains, and that knowing who the taps are, the ones that give you energy, and knowing the drains, the ones who take energy, are really important as far as self-care is concerned and emotional management is concerned. That doesn't mean you should never help somebody that is a drain because, hey, you're their tap. But you need to have boundaries. Maybe it's a case of we're only going to do it for an hour. I learned a lot about this when I was training in a lot of psychotherapy disciplines. The importance of, well, why do therapists only tend to do kind of 50-minute meetings? Because it's tiring. And therefore, having that boundary, that consistency, that this is a time frame that we're working from, is important. Now, when you are in your own environment, you can still have boundaries. You can still have rules. The thing is that people tend to think that boundaries are a bad thing. But boundaries aren't about punishment or control. They're about creating safety, predictability, and trust. Why would I trust somebody who is completely unpredictable, who doesn't have any boundaries or rules, who I can manipulate and just coerce into doing whatever I want to do? You're not reliable. You're not safe. Thinking about it from a survival point of view, I need somebody who knows what's going on, is got a level of understanding and control, and can keep me safe. And if suddenly they don't seem to have any boundaries or rules or understanding, then that's not a safe person. So boundaries actually denote this kind of safety. If we put it this way, like imagine a world where traffic lights changed randomly, or the rules of the game just kept shifting. How would that make you feel? You'd be confused. You'd never feel like you knew how to play or how to get there, or cars would keep crashing into each other because they'd not know how it worked and what to do. Now, for individuals who struggle with emotional regulation or impulse control, unclear boundaries actually create anxiety, frustration, and often escalations as well. Maybe a good way of looking at this is, can any of you think of a relationship where maybe there was a point in a relationship where there was a little bit of lack of clarity around what the rules and what the boundaries were? A good example could be the early stages of a romantic relationship, for instance, whereas a case where a few dates in and we don't know, are we going out? Are we exclusive? Are we boyfriend or girlfriend? Whatever it is. But that can feel a little bit, I feel uncertain. I feel unsure. I feel insecure. I don't know what I am and aren't supposed to do. I don't know what they're not doing. And that can lead to disconnection, distrust, and challenges. So having clear boundaries in any relationship is really important. Boundaries provide a framework where people can feel safe, they know what to expect, and they can learn to navigate the world around them more effectively and navigate the relationship with you more effectively. Now, there is a myth that boundaries are restrictive. Some people believe that setting boundaries is unfair or controlling, and I come across it an awful lot with some parenting models. The case of it's just completely like, we should let the kids do whatever they want to do. But boundaries are really important. Boundaries help people to feel safe. A wonderful example of this, and I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but I got taught this by a foster parent, because a lot of people think that kids don't like boundaries, but kids need boundaries. They love boundaries. They just don't always know they do. And a great analogy to understand, so why do they push against them all the time, is on a roller coaster. On a roller coaster, we have that harness is pulled down over our shoulders that holds us in. But what does everybody do to start off with? Well, they push that harness as hard as they possibly can. So they're pushing that boundary. That doesn't mean they don't like the harness. That means they just need to check whether it's safe. They just need to check how it works. They just need to check whether it's going to hold them and how supportive it is. So that doesn't mean you don't like the harness. In fact, you really like the harness. So without a boundary, sometimes there is an inconsistency. It causes problems around behaviors because it's not about stopping people doing things. It's about guiding them towards healthier interactions. Is it okay for us to hit other people? No, it's not. The boundary needs to be put in place. Is it okay for me to run across the road without checking both ways? No, it's not. It's going to end up with me dead. So therefore, and you could say, well, they'll learn from their own mistakes, but things like that, that's not appropriate. So think of boundaries like the rules of a football match. Without them, the game's chaotic. Rules don't take away the fun. They create the environment for it, because otherwise nobody knows what it is. I get teased sometimes because I love organized fun. I enjoy having some planning, some things. That doesn't mean I don't allow flexibility within that. If I set a time to go and do something. So I do it every year. So on my birthday, I enjoy organizing what we're going to do. It's one of my favorite. It's one day of the year I sometimes get to control things in the way I'd like to. So I'll organize lots of things, but there'll be clear times going, well, we're going to be here at this time, here at this time, here at this time. I make sure there's room between to allow people flexibility and things like that. But if I didn't set any times, a number of times people just don't do anything. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, and some people like to live like that. But if I'm looking to get a productive life and I want at the end of the day to go, that was amazing, I did day X, Y, and Z, then I need to set some kind of boundaries and some kind of plan around that. That doesn't mean that I then get to say, if we go, okay, let's change our mind, that's okay. But we know it from somewhere. So, biggest mistakes people make with boundaries. One is being inconsistent. No means no except when I'm too tired to enforce it. Okay? If boundaries shift, the person will test them repeatedly to figure out where they actually stand. Is that a boundary? It sometimes is, sometimes isn't. Using boundaries as punishment instead of guidance as well. If we're throwing boundaries out as if you do this, I'll take away X, instead of framing it as here's what's expected, here's what happens if it isn't followed. Making sure the recognition of this outcome, this rule, has consequences. The same as all behavior does. If I push a box, it falls off the table. That's a consequence. It's not the box is punishing me for it. But letting people know about the expectations and about the outcomes that will happen if that's not followed, it's very different from going a power struggle. If you do this, I'll do this. That ultimatum. One thing that sometimes people do forget to do, and they take for granted, and I know it's an old logic kind of parent thinking of, why should I do that? Because I said so. But people are far more likely to respect boundaries when they understand the reason behind them. Just a because makes a huge difference. I'm currently reading a book called Influence, which is all about understanding human behavior around psychology for sales and marketing and things like that. So stuff I do in my business life. And there was an example they gave that was really interesting in there, which is about a study that was done around a photocopier. They had a row of people at a photocopier, or they created a queue at this photocopier. And then a person comes in from the back and goes straight to the front and then says that they want to make some copies. Now, they tried it in two different ways, and they found a significant difference in the two reactions. When the person goes in and goes, I need to make some, can I go first? Because I need to make, can I go first? I need to copy 5 sheets, right? If they just left it at that, some people would then say, no, you can wait your turn, go to the back. We're all doing copies. If, however, the person went in and said, I need to make some copies because I'm in a rush, actually, most people let them go in front just because I'm in a rush. Actually, there's more to it than that as far as the experiment went a little bit further, in the fact that they didn't actually need to say anything else. Just the word because, just giving a reason, actually made a real difference to the people's reaction. So in another example, it went, I need to make I need to make 5 copies. Can I go first? Because I need to make some copies because I need to get these all done. Again, nothing added there, nothing new, but actually increased the likelihood of people complying or allowing that person to go first. So there is an element of just influence here, but also there's an element of fairness. Tell them why. Why is that boundary important? Why is it beneficial? I know it may feel like, well, they shouldn't be questioning me, but this is old logic and we're going into parent to child mode. And if we're dealing with an adult, that's not appropriate. But now we're learning more about understanding children. That doesn't work great either. People are more likely to respect boundaries when they understand the reason behind them. A school rule about running in the corridors is easier to follow if the student knows it's about preventing injuries, not just about doing as they're told. Consistency, fairness, and clarity make boundaries work, not fear of power struggles. How do we set effective boundaries that work? 1, keep it simple. No long explanations, just straightforward expectations. Enforce calmly and consistently. It's not about being harsh, it's about being predictable. Look, I see you've made a choice, you understand the consequences of this now, this will be instigated. If they react negatively to that, going, that's not fair, or I don't agree, or whatever, just understand it's hard sometimes to understand boundaries or to manage them, or we may make mistakes. And they may just be shame shielding themselves away from feeling that, hey, I've made a mistake and I can't allow myself to feel bad about myself, so I need to blame somebody. Just empathize with it, but that doesn't mean we then shift the boundaries. Use when-then statements instead of threats. Encourage choices and responsibility rather than saying you must. If you don't, just, hey, when you've done this, then we'll do this. I actually had a conversation just yesterday with a parent who was struggling to get his daughter to use the toilet before she went to bed. So then she was getting up later because he was telling her, go and try on the toilet, go to the toilet. And she was going to need the toilet. And it was becoming a battle. And they were going to bed irritated with each other, which is never nice for any parent. Instead, we've changed it now to, once you've been to the toilet, I'll tuck you in. That's it. Not, you need to go to the toilet. Just when you go to the toilet, we'll get you tucked in. Okay? That's it. When, then. Model the boundaries you want to see as well. If you want respect, show respect. So much as far as electronics is a prime example. You shouldn't be on your electronics, but I'm going to sit here on my phone for the next hour. You shouldn't be on your electronics, but I'm going to be watching it. We have to kind of lead by example a little bit. If we're saying this is bad for you, but then we're doing it ourselves, isn't that a little bit hypocritical? I would say, especially with children, and obviously a little bit of focus around parenting here, but generally across the board, hypocrisy doesn't tend to go down well. How did we all feel when we were told not to be engaging in social activities, and then we found out that people in power were engaging in social activities? We just went, what's the point? How dare they? Why should we follow the rules if the people who are making the rules aren't willing to follow themselves? Yeah, but how often do we do that to others? So next time you hesitate, before you're setting a boundary or enforcing a boundary, remember, boundaries aren't walls, they're roadmaps. They're a way of navigating a relationship and understanding. You don't restrict freedom, they create a safe way to navigate it. And if you're struggling with consistency, and you don't worry, you can start fresh today. What's a boundary you're struggling to maintain right now? Maybe pop us a comment or ask the question. We'd love to hear your thoughts of where you might be struggling, or maybe where you found a boundary has really worked for you and changed the dynamics of a relationship. Please give us some feedback. What boundaries work for you? What have you found difficult? If you found anything in this episode helpful, share it with a colleague or friend who could use some boundary setting clarity. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge, and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description.